So, for those of you who have been hanging with us for some time now, here is a family that needs no introduction. And yet, for those of you who are newer with us, it's our pleasure to have Mike come. He was a Bible teacher here for some time, and following that, God called him to Ukraine. I believe it was back in the 90s now, wasn't it? Yeah, so he's been over there for a good little while, and now back in the States just for a moment. So without further ado, Mike, thank you so much for being here with us. God bless.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me? All right. It's great to be here. It's a little bit surreal. I think just a couple days ago we were 6 time zones away, and I was joking with Jason yesterday that this is Mike jet-lagged and unfiltered, as a lot of things are very fresh and a lot of wounds are still healing, and God is still working. And it's always a privilege to be here. I have so many wonderful memories. I was going through the timeline of my first time to Ukraine. It'd be 30 years ago this summer, in 1992, just after the Cold War had ended, the Soviet Union had collapsed. I had my first cup of coffee in Kiev, Ukraine, when I was there with a group from Word of Life. We did a choir tour with a couple different cities. And I went back with great excitement and saw people coming forward, wanting to have the Word of God for themselves. A church like this would be packed, and I remember meeting the pastor and some people later, and they said, oh yeah, all the church members were underneath praying for the service. We just wanted the guests to be there. And I said, wow, this is like Acts. I've never seen anything like this before. And I went back thinking I should get more training because they're very educated here. So I spent 3 years in Baptist Bible Seminary, got my degree, and did a year-and-a-half internship outside Moscow, Russia. And was there from 95 through 97. This was when Yeltsin was reelected, if you want to do political timeline. I returned, graduated from seminary, did a summer class at Indiana University, intensive Russian. When I was in Russia, I lived with a family, didn't speak English, taught the Bible in 2 public schools, worked with a church plant there, had a great love for the people and for what God was doing there, but there wasn't a team to return to. So I went back, and after finishing my final at my intensive Russian course, I got a call from Tim Hostetter saying, we're looking for a Bible teacher, and can you start next week? And I was like, whoa, and I think I was hired 2 days or 3 days before the school year opened. I think it was week 2 that they said, oh yeah, there are answer keys for these assignments. And so I said, oh, that'd be helpful. So I taught 7th through 12th grade Bible, phys ed, coached basketball, soccer. So from 1997 to 2003, I was a member here, taught, loved the church, did all kinds of things here. Just very warm memories of my time here. And as chairman of the Missions Council, one of the final things before I left for Ukraine was they agreed to support me and send me to Ukraine. I arrived there in 2003 with ABWE, single, and looking forward to what God was going to do there. It was a tough first year. I was adjusting to language and culture. I was there with Scott Carter, who the church also supported, and saw wonderful things that were happening there. It was kind of a tough beginning for me. About a year into that, I met a single gal from Seattle, Washington, who later became my wife. And so Rachel and I met in Odessa, Ukraine, 2004. We were married in 2005. We have 5 kids. The older 3 were born in Ukraine. So on their American passport, it says place of birth, Ukraine. So Ukraine is a part of our lives. Russia was a part of my life. I've been back there several times to see what God's doing in different places around the country. And so the whole conflict and the tension, even in the last 7 years or so, has been very difficult for me to understand, and prayed that it would be resolved peacefully. We returned to Ukraine in July of 2020. We were here right when COVID started, and we delayed 3 months to go back because of COVID. We finally got back in July 2020, and it was a difficult transition as the world church, or world everywhere, had the same issues with masks and all the health issues that went along with that. And let me see, oh, there we go. And that was our return in 2020. And we had a lot of happening before the war, so I want to briefly talk about that. And Rachel's going to come up and join me in a moment. But this is Kiev, Ukraine. That's the Ukrainian flag, blue sky, yellow fields, ripe for harvest because it's the breadbasket of Europe. It's a lot of wheat, a lot of oil, not cooking oil, not the other type of oil. So they've done a lot of that. That's kind of their economy. You see the statue right there. That was to remember the defeat of the fascists in World War II, and that's the statue represents freedom. And I've been to the top of that shield. It's kind of a scary journey up there, but it's quite the view. That's in a park in Kiev. And so you see behind the peaceful city, 4 million people, that's where my home has been since 2003. Love what's going on. There's a wonderful place to raise my family, and we really enjoy our time there. Let's see, is this clicker going to work on? There we go. Oops. So this is the symbol of masks. This is the meeting of faculty to start 2020 school year at Kiev Theological Seminary. And for a number of months and really my whole time there, it was kind of mask on, mask off, online, offline. The church that I've been a part of did not meet once when we were there without masks. So even when we left in January, they were still wearing masks for worship. And so there's been some hard hit areas there. Nobody I knew died of that, but everyone I knew had it once, twice. We had it twice. And so that was kind of colors the ministry that we had there. And what did COVID do to the world? It kind of pushed everybody away from each other. And so outreach to try and invite unsafe people or visitors to come to church to do an outreach and things like that, they had lots of reasons like, oh, we're okay. Maybe when things get better and things get more open, we might be more open to you, spiritually as well as physically. That's what we saw for a year and a half or so when we were there. And a lot of my meetings and even some of the classes looked a lot like this. Fortunately, I didn't have to teach online. I taught several in-person classes when things kind of opened up for a little bit, and then the numbers got high, then they closed them down again. So that was kind of what it looked like for a couple months. I'm looking for Rachel. There she goes. Rachel's going to share a little bit of what that looked like.
Okay, as Mike was saying, this was a difficult time as it was for everybody, COVID, and we came back right in the middle of it. So I think we felt isolated from our own church because we had services online, as you probably did at some point. And I think everybody felt that way. People were really frustrated. Believers were frustrated because you want to do outreach, but how can you do outreach when you can't even gather people together? So during that time, fortunately, one of the things we were able to do was open our home, even just our yard, because sometimes you couldn't even have people in your living room. But when the weather was decent, this was a gathering we had of Church Ministry Institute. I think you did. So it was just really nice to get together when nobody could get together for classes or for services, just to have some fellowship together. This is our kids in our Sunday school having class outside, since we really hated to have our kids masked, and so we let them do it outside so they could be unmasked. This is another group we had in our yard. This was gals group that I've been involved in, and it was just, even though it was cold, I think this was September or October, we just had a fire and got blankets out, and everyone was just so happy to actually see each other face to face and have fellowship. So through that time, we really, like I said, it was a struggle. We did see some people drawing near to the Lord through our gals group. There's one gal in particular, I don't think she's actually in that picture, but unsaved gal living with her fiance, but has just been like a sponge, just really, come from a completely unsaved background, has really been looking forward to each time we get together and just has been really taking it all in. Unfortunately, she's in Poland right now. She had to leave the country, but we still kept contact with her for the time. Okay, so this is, I was going to also mention, one of the other things we were able to do was have a Mother's Day outreach in the spring, last spring, and it was also outside in our yard, and we had a really good group of gals from our church. Our pastor's mother is just a very, very Soviet type woman, just very, a good picture for me is like, we went into a government office one day, and a Soviet woman, sitting behind the desk, and you say, congratulations. It was a holiday, and she's like, don't congratulate me now. Let's do business. You congratulate me later. And they're just very, very cut and dried. And this is how you try to be friendly to her. Sometimes she'd appear at some church event, and it was just like she'd hardly say two words back to you, just, no smiles. And she came to this Mother's Day outreach, and my mother actually shared over Zoom, and she was just really opened up to that. And I kept trying to reach out to her, and when we left actually in January, she was in tears, and I was like, is this the same woman? We just saw her open up over the last couple of months, and she actually prayed to repent maybe a month and a half ago, and now wants to get baptized, and she's serving in the church. And so God is still working, and Mike had opportunity during that COVID period to go teach in a couple of remote locations, and this is a city, Kremenchuk, which is east of us. Taught, which class was that? Family ministry. And another down south in Zaporozhye. This is just a wedding. This is a little side note. Good family friend of ours, Oksana, and Ellie was her bridesmaid. They usually have just one attendant. So Ellie was her bridesmaid, and Susanna was her flower girl. And we were really happy for them, a really wonderful Christian guy. Oh, yeah, and we did their premarital counseling, yeah. Is that it? And then the other opportunity, which we had sort of on the last tail end of COVID this last year, was to start English Club in our church. So English, of course, is a big deal in Ukraine. They're really trying very hard to become like the West. I think that's probably a difference between Russia and Ukraine, is Ukraine really wants to be Western, especially the younger generation. And so they're really pushing English, even though they aren't usually conversant with you in English. They're really trying, and the younger generation knows it better than the older generation. So people are often hiring tutors for their children because they feel like the government, the schools are not giving a good enough level. So we did start an English club in our church for children and teenagers. And this was also during a time when we had to be masked. We kind of went back and forth on that, but we had a group of maybe 15, 20, 25 kids that would come, mostly from unbelieving families. Yeah, Fridays after school, right after school, we had that. So they'd come over, and we did that free of charge, and we'd have little cookies and juice for them. And so I know a lot of the parents were, very, pleasantly surprised, because they pay big money for tutors. And so they're just happy to have something where their children are learning English, and here they're getting refreshments. And so it's really just a way to develop connections with the community. Now, before I go on with that, we wanted to give you all a really big thank you for the Vacation Bible School offering, which I don't know if you remember that or not. 2019, okay. That went to our children's ministry at our church. And that was a really big blessing and surprise to our little children's ministry. And so what we did is we saved that during the COVID time. And then last summer, we did remodeling in our 2 children's rooms at church. And we just meet in the downstairs of a really big apartment building. So we have a sanctuary and 2 little classrooms. But they were, so you can see here, you can actually see the left, the right. The right-hand picture is in our sanctuary, the end little corner of our sanctuary, and the left-hand picture is after the remodel. And I'm really sorry we don't have a picture of before, but it was basically, that lower section was like vinyl wood paneling, and the upper section was kind of a sea green color. And we had about 3 different sets of cabinets, which were all different, like colors and brands and everything. So it was all really kind of thrown together. And the flooring was also kind of a turquoise with black. So that's more for the women probably than the men. But anyhow, we did both of the rooms, and the other one looks similar to this one now. So we just really felt like we needed to, if we wanted to reach out to children in our community, that we needed to make it a place that parents want to send their kids to. Because even though Ukraine is a poor country, especially out in the villages, Kiev is very much, like I said, trying to be Western, and they have all kinds of cute little coffee shops, and they're really trying, and we need to try too as a church to make it nice, a place that people want to come to. So that's what we've done, and we've had a nice little group of kids coming. But that's a ministry that you can pray for, that there will be fruit come from that. Okay.
In December and moving into January, there was this constant, troops are surrounding Ukraine. They're going to attack. They're going to invade. The embassy in early January closed, and all the personnel left. We, as a missionary team, our family, and also Rachel's brother and a couple other single gals in our ABW missions team, who I am the team leader, we made plans, and we had satellite phones, and we had generators, and we were prepared to hunker down in place if needed, or to flee, or maybe a combination of that. So we did a lot of preparation months up until January, when just looking at our situation, we have an older 7-passenger station wagon, and it's 16 hours to drive to the Polish border. I didn't know if it was going to make it, and we had a single gal that was supposed to go with us, so I made the determination that we're going to have to fly to do that. And I wanted to fly out before the airports closed. And so January 31st, we had a just 2-hour or an hour and a half flight, direct flight to Budapest, Hungary. And we packed up 7 suitcases of everything that we thought we might need, and packing, thinking we may not be able to return soon. And so documents, and it's a little different than we've gone away for a year to visit churches, but thinking we may not return, that's a different type of packing. And destroying documents and financial documents, nothing, and other things like that is what we're doing as we're packing, getting ready, trying to keep homeschooling the kids and keep our church not to worry, and keep our churches not to worry, and our families. And as we arrived to Budapest, I told the kids, all right, we'll be here a month, and then we'll reevaluate, and hopefully we'll be able to go back in early March. It was about 3 weeks later, a couple days after the Olympics ended, February 22nd, 24th. That is when, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the special operation to denazify Ukraine, I think it was the official terminology that the president of Russia used for the invasion. And in 3 different locations, north from Kiev, east from Kharkiv, that area, and also from the south. So the only way for people to leave was to go west. And as we were in Budapest, and we were staying at a mission-owned apartment that was very nice for us, they gave us a car, and so it was a very comfortable place for us to be for even a long period of time. So we were grateful for that. The first few weeks was about getting all our friends to safety. And so sometimes I felt like is it Sherpa, is that the right word, to try to help get people to safety. And so they said, Mike, do you know anyone in this town? I said, contact this person. And so a lot of them went to Western Ukraine. Many of them also crossed the borders into Europe. But imagine if you're a man, 18 to 60, you have to stay in the country. That was the decree that came down on the 24th. So men were not allowed to leave unless they're foreigners, or if they had 3 children under the age of 18. If they didn't, if they only had 2, or if one of them was over 18, they were required to serve their country. That doesn't mean they're drafted in fighting. If they didn't have fighting experience, they wouldn't put them in a dangerous position. All of our friends did not have military experience, so they served in different ways. This is a graphic I saw that everyone can do something, or everyone has their own front, their own way of service. For some, it was fighting. For others, it was medicine, being a doctor, a frontline worker. For others, it was online to change the narrative, the indoctrination of Russia and the world, make sure they understand what's happening, and also to try to get support from Western countries. So some of our friends were involved in that. Some were hacking down bad sites that were negatively impacting Ukraine and humanitarian aid. And in the middle of that is prayer. And you were part of that. You were part of that prayer army that prayed because that was all we could do. Felt helpless, felt like there should be something we could do more. But as we prayed, we saw God answering. And I saw people that spent several days in the bomb shelters in Kiev, in the subway, in church and seminary buildings, saw the fact that they had to get out of the city. And so they would get on packed trains, they would go in long lines of cars, pack into buses. Churches from Western Ukraine came to get them and evacuate them that way. So there's a lot of different ways that they use to get people to safety and to security. And I'm going to just kind of tell you some of the stories, some of the people that were there. Next one. Next slide. There we go. First, we need to go through a map. Okay, this is a very clear map. What is Ukraine and what is not Russia? So, can you pick out what is Ukraine? The blue one in the middle. So that's just kind of a fun map that was going around. The next map is another illustration of that, maybe a little bit. The last time Ukraine was invaded was in 1941, when Hitler marched troops across. That was the last time that the air raid sirens were used. That was the last time that they started fortifications in and around the cities. They blew up some bridges purposefully to slow down the attack. So there's a lot of this strategic that they were doing. You can see on the map above, you have Belarus on the north, and Kiev is right above that second two in the middle. And that was why it was really difficult for us in Kiev, because just an hour or less than that, about 100 miles away, was hundreds of thousands of troops, tens of thousands. So that's another map. Next one. This might give you a better understanding of the size. Okay, on the left you have Ukraine over what the U.S. would look like. So we are in Kiev. Well, I guess there it's just in the middle, and 4 million people. And you have Kharkiv is near the northeast. You have Odessa, you see in the south by the Black Sea. And you have the Carpathian Mountains in Lviv. And then you have Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova are the countries that people are going to. So there were over 5-6 million people, I think, is the last numbers I heard, plus people that went to those countries. A lot of them went through those countries. I spent some time at 5 different border crossings briefly in Hungary, all 5 border crossings in Hungary, and I saw what was happening there. Very well organized, very good volunteers. They were being well received when they're coming through days of travel. But they were coming, women and children, and I saw one man over 60 and about 250 refugees that I saw. So they're leaving behind their brother, their father, their husbands, and so they're making this journey and also pets. A lot of people made decisions to stay where they were because they had to take care of an elderly parent or a relative, or they had a dog or a cat or a snake or other things. This went to their thinking like, I need to stay and take care of this, whatever it was. And so every family made different choices. Some of them thought the best thing to do would be send their loved ones to a different country in Europe. And we still have friends of ours that have their children and their wives are in Europe. So that gives you kind of a picture of the map. Let's go to the next one. And churches became multifunctional. I'm not sure where this church was, but they had a wedding, and in the back you have cots of refugees. So a church auditorium about this size, they would move all the chairs forward, they would have beds and sleep on the floor, because they have small little churches that didn't have the room for millions of people that were leaving and coming to their villages, coming to their towns. And so this shows the new church for several months, and still for many of them, this is a reality where they're still waiting to return. They want to go back home, but for now, they can't. Next one. The only Bible school I knew that was damaged, this is in Irpin, and destroyed. I've been there, I've not taught there, but this was in Irpin, Bucha, just north of the city. These are 2 towns where we actually looked at buying a house before we ended up where we were outside of the city. And our house is fine and everything is good there. But this is one illustration of what took place during the worst of the fighting when the Russian troops were trying to capture the city. And the president, the 43-year-old former actor, who's kind of a worldwide symbol, who's not left the capital still. You know, his wife and his 2 kids are in Poland. He hasn't seen them, I don't think, since the war began. On the right, that's the Gospel of John that was burned, and you see some atrocities. There's lots of things that I will not talk about that took place in and around the city. Next one. This is just one picture to illustrate the heavy fighting that took place, and many tanks and people and buildings. One of our friends is from Irpin. He said 70% of our schools are damaged, and 12 out of 13 schools were destroyed in Irpin, which is, it's 45 minutes drive from our house. Next one. And this is my friend Vasya. To lighten things up, I jokingly say that we teach a class at seminary how to take proper selfies. So a lot of the pictures here are pastors taking selfies to show what's happening around them and be involved in what's taking place here. I taught Vasya back before I even met Rachel, 2003, 2004. I've seen him grow and develop as a pastor, as a leader. He was head of the youth ministry program for a while. Now he's one of the large, well-known pastors in a large church in Irpin. And he wrote this to a lot of different people, but also thank for those foreigners who do not stop thinking about our Ukraine and hometown or village and daily doing good things for victory. These are some of the humanitarian aid. They bring humanitarian aid in and they bring people out. So they would get calls and communicate with people back and forth. We have 12 people that want to leave Kharkiv. And so they would get a group of vehicles to go get them and bring them out. They were waiting to go into some of the more dangerous places like Mariupol. They had 300 vehicles in some of these convoys that would go to different places where they were needed. And that was their service, and that was dangerous service. But they would go and empty out hospitals and orphanages and just do what they can to get people to safety and security. Next one. This used to be a statue of Lenin, but the town tore it down and put the Ten Commandments up instead. This is there's a lot of good churches and seminaries in this town. And this is what Vasya also wrote, that together we will rebuild. And he's been back in the city, and we just saw him 10 days ago. He came to see us in Budapest with his 4 girls, and another man, next one. On the left, his name is Sasha. He also came with his 5 kids. And because they have multiple children, they can come and go. So they came out, took a break from what they're doing to just see Europe. And we spent a good day with them, just having fun in the city, talking, praying. How can we help you? And other than these 2 men, I have not seen, one other exception, people that I know since the war began. I've communicated with a lot of them almost on a weekly, daily basis, some of them. But just that hug was very special to see them and just greet them. And our families knowing each other well. We were at camp again this summer with them. Those are the reasons we go back. Those are the reasons we want to get there to encourage them. And he's a pastor in a city 5 hours west of Kiev. And this is his group. One of the early requests is bulletproof vests. And so there are bulletproof vests that were found for the drivers because the drivers were shot at. And they had helmets, and they would go into some of these places. That's just Sasha with his crew. Go ahead. What? Yeah, well, the church, Rachel was reminded that the believers were some of the first people to go in to get these people out. The government was slow in get the evacuations, but they said, we have to help. You know, sometimes there was a church saying, we have 50 refugees in our building, can you help us get them out? And they said, we'll do it. So they got their vans and they went and did that. And then the government said, well, I guess we should do something too. And so they kind of a strong light in the midst of darkness. A lot of wonderful things are happening. A lot of evil, horrific things. War is awful. And there's no words to describe that. But through the darkness, the light shines the brightest. And this is true, especially in Kiev. For the first month or so, Kiev was in danger of being overrun. They said, 2-3 days, it'd be taken over. Maybe 2 weeks, but eventually it would be taken over. Well, God, in answer to many prayers in early April, the Russian troops left and went to other parts. And so our friends started to return and to go and see some of the damage that was there. And some of them stayed. This is a church that stayed throughout the whole time. It was in the southern part of Kiev, not far from where we live. They called, and I talked to one of them. I'll show him in a minute. But they said, can we use your church building? Because our church members, the pastors, they went out to Western Ukraine for the month or so. But these men, the pastors, had come from Eastern Ukraine before. They came from Donetsk back in 2014 when they had to flee because of that. They said, we don't want to run again. So they stayed there, and they started feeding people. Every day, they go to near their church building where we lived for 12 years before we moved to the house. And they're feeding people, and people are coming, and while they're waiting in line to go through, they preach to them. And people are praying for repentance. People are coming to know Christ. And soon our church building that they were using was not big enough, so they rented something twice the size. Okay, next picture. And they have Bible studies. They're sitting down, and some of them never had opened a Bible before. But when eternity is that close, people are more open to hear spiritual truth and understand, why are you helping strangers? Why are you showing love to us when you should be bitter and hating life? Let me open the Bible and share with you. And that's Pastor Oleg is back to you. And this is in the same church, the same place we had English Club. And this is also a room that was remodeled by your gifts. And Samaritan Purse has some gifts that we also were able to distribute to some people during that time as well. But none of these people came to church before. And they came from different cities. Most of them aren't from Kiev. They came from other places. But now they live there. And I talked to one of the pastors, and he said, we have 40 people want to get baptized. And so they're planning to have a baptism very soon. Next slide. And this is just a picture outside, and I have videos of some of this, of preaching, and he's praying, and then there's a noise of a plane overhead, and they all stop and look up. They say, that's ours, to one of our planes. And that's just kind of the life that they are still living. Even though the tanks aren't close, there's still dangers there. Next one. This is Zhenya. This is another pastor named Zhenya, or Zheka. He installed our air conditioners at our house. He taught at the seminary, or he was one of my students at the seminary. He married the pastor Oleg's daughter, and so he is one of the key leaders there. And I talked to him. I said, "What do you need? How can we help you?" And he said, "We need a vehicle." I said, "My car's in the driveway. I'll get you the keys." And so he's driving our vehicle now. And he took a picture of our house, and the kids were playing on the trampoline. So I had a brief video of our house, and I showed my 5-year-old, and he said, "Daddy, it's a miracle. Our house is fine," and just things like that. You see through the kids' eyes. Like, yeah, all we see is destruction. All you hear is destruction and death, but God is working. And that's right outside our church building. This is about a month ago. Now they've moved just 2 blocks away and having a great impact. Okay, next one. And just faces of trying to absorb all that's happening. And how do you even talk to them? I've talked to, some of the guys that visit us, and they say they come for food, and they say thank you, and then they sit down, and they want to talk to you. They just want someone to talk to. They've been in their basement. They've been behind massive COVID for years, and they just want to share with somebody and have someone pray with them. And that's what's 18 years of ministry is like, as I see the people I've invested in, seeing them do the work of the ministry. And I want to be beside them, but I see what they're doing, and I'm thrilled to see that God is working in that situation, and lives are being changed. We go about 100 miles outside the city to a village. This is a pastor I just got to know since the war started, actually. And they have a church about 30, said half our membership left, but hundreds of people are coming from Kiev, and now we've renovated the school, and the mayor put us on TV, and they're doing a lot of wonderful things. And here, Oleg is preaching to some of the people who are just waiting for hot meals. 4 days a week, they give them hot meals. So they come, They pray with them, and I was talking to him on the phone. He says, Mike, they never even heard of Psalm 23 before. So my preaching can be very simple. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and explaining to them the gospel. And he's got 2 kids, and he's also made trips back and forth across the border. Okay, next one. And this is some of what Pastor Legg on the right, again, pastor taking a selfie. And he wrote me, he says, my car's kind of worn down. And you can see why. A small little village car, but they wanted to get humanitarian aid to some of the places that needed it. And so I was able to help him get a newer vehicle so he can do that. That's their church building with mattresses on the floor. And there's some of the people they're feeding. And these are some brand new people that never met before this war began. And that's just another example. Okay, next picture. This is a church in Kiev. I've preached here before, and top left is Pastor Igor. He was in Romania at a camp when the war started, and he went back, and he's got 3 kids, so he can come and go as he wants. His wife, Susanna, they're both used to be addicted to drugs before God changed their lives 15 years ago or so. And now he's pastoring and doing some wonderful ministry, both in Romania and some of the refugees there, and in Kiev. And that's just some of the heroes of this war. Okay, next one. There we go. In the middle of the country is a good friend, Andre. I've known him 18 years too, and seen him grow from just a teenager to now the pastor of this church called Living Word Church. I've talked to him a couple times, and they're helping out with, they had field hospital there. Samaritan's Purse came where we're doing some ministry there. He's met with some chaplains. They have a military hospital where he does some visitation. They're ministering to children because you have children now that have lost their fathers, or their fathers are fighting. And so there's a great need, and schools have gone online, if at all. About 2 weeks, they had a war vacation, as I talked to one of my teacher friends. They didn't have school for 2 weeks, so then they went online and trying to do what they can in the midst of the war. And so Andre is also a teacher. He teaches economics at a university there in town. And he said, I still teach, but they've cut my salary in half. And I said, what do you need? And so I've been able to help him. And that's just another example of a church. And they had a baby dedication when the war was happening. And their city's been unaffected for the most part because the location they're at. Next one. This is Vitaly. God's worked in his life. He's from eastern Ukraine. He also had to leave because the war started in 2014, came to Kiev, ended up south of Kiev. He now has 4 kids, so what does that mean if he has that many kids? Cross the border for free. So his wife and his children are actually in Prague, in Czech Republic, because his youngest son has Downs and has had several serious surgeries, so he's better taken care of medically there. But he continues to go back and forth even to where he's from, in Luhansk, in that area. And he's a great visionary for ministry. He started a ministry about, I think, 2 years ago. It's called Wise Carpenter, Mudre Tesla in Ukrainian. And it's to reach boys and teach them woodworking skills. And so this has started, and I think there's at least a dozen, maybe more than that, cities that this ministry is developed through. And he's just able to help him get some more funds to do that more, because you have boys that need mentors and need people to help them. And so he's doing some of that, as well as pastoring a church, and he's taught some classes. I was hoping to see him before I left. That didn't quite work out, but another dear friend. Next. And this is not where he's from, this area, in Ilychansk. And this is Stepan, the pastor, the different pastor, but he's got his bulletproof vest and helmet and giving bread Because supply lines were cut down and gas got really expensive, they had to get food, they had to get medicine in, and you have people without medication in different places. So just the country is just like, I had to Etch-a-Sketch growing up. You ever one of those? You make this nice thing, you turn over and shake it, and pretty much gone. That's kind of what sometimes life felt like there, where you're starting from scratch. And leadership in churches and other places, some of them have just gone different places for different reasons. But this is Stopa, day 20, and we're now at day 97, I think, of the war. Just talking about what he's doing, the situation is worsening, number of people in need is increasing. Just recently, I think last week, they blew up the bridge between, Russia did, between the city. He's, I think, on our side, but he may be even trapped on the other side. I think he's okay. But this is some people waiting for food and waiting for help. And his son-in-law? Yeah. His son-in-law was one of the workers that was killed in Irpin early on, shot by a Russian soldier, right? No. I'm sorry, what? Go ahead, you can explain it. I missed it.
They had blown up, the Ukrainians had blown up the bridge from Irpin to Kiev to keep the tanks from coming in. And so he was helping evacuate along with Vasya's church. And they had mined the whole area around the bridge. And so he had a mother and 2 children he was helping get across the area. And they stumbled upon a mine. And all of them were killed. Yeah, it was very sad.
Loved the Lord and had a great testimony. His wife and a child too. Stopan is seeing all this. He's been involved in ministry in the war zone since the war started in eastern Ukraine, which is something we forget about. You know, there were 14,000 people killed before this war even started, 15,000. This ongoing war in Donetsk and Luhansk. And this is Odessa. Again, pastor taking a selfie with all these new people at this church in Odessa. And they came from some of these dangerous places, and they're trying to find homes and places to stay and to live and food, and there's just no jobs. There's really very little opportunities for them. And so the church is giving them hot meals and doing what they can. And they have a little service there, and it's nice to see smiles in the midst of tragedy. And he's doing a wonderful job. Okay, next one. And they're there serving hot meals to some of the people there. Okay, next. That's a lot. I'll talk to more in next hour, but we just got back Thursday from Budapest, where we've been the last 4 months almost. We are here in the area for about 2 months, and then we will be going back to Seattle, where my wife's from, and visit her family and some churches there. But trying to make a focus on rest, and it's been hard to process everything that's happening. Every moment, it seems every hour, I'm getting a text from somebody. Got a text just this morning. That's one of my friends, how he's doing. It was 3 months now without my wife and my 2 kids. They're in Sweden, and 3 months without a job. He's serving our church, a leg. Pastor, remember him and the team that was there. And that's just one example of lives that are changed. And the Ukraine is a different Ukraine than the one we left. What's next? We don't know. You know, the least we will go back and maybe serve in Hungary, so we can make some maybe trips across every once in a while. Will we move our whole family back home? I don't know. I mean, we're praying that. We want to do that. We see God working in wonderful ways, and overstaffed. Our church is just overwhelmed with the amount of new people. And so we would love to be a part of that. But we're here to, first of all, thank you for your prayers. God has answered a lot of prayers. He hasn't answered some of the main ones we have, but we're still praying for the war to end, for the country to start to heal. I asked my two pastor friends about what are some struggles they're going to. They said, people are asking us to forgive Russia. I said, we can't forgive someone that's continuing beating on us. So there'll be a time for that. You know, the churches in Russia and the churches in Ukraine are also having their own war, not physically. So there's been a lot of difficulties with that. And Europe is receiving a lot of people. In America is receiving a lot of people from Ukraine. And just the adjustments to that is difficult. So we just ask for you to pray with us. And we know that you've been behind us, and we're so grateful. We have been looking forward to seeing you. A lot of this is really hard to talk about. You know, that's been our lives, and that's our home. And we don't know what's God doing through this. Our team finally got together in Bucharest, Romania. Her brother is from Odessa. He's actually there right now. He'll be coming back and flying back to the States soon. But he's made trips back and forth. It's because it's about an hour and a half from Moldova to Odessa. So we finally were able to get together in Bucharest, Romania, and I used the emphasis on the last four letters, Bucharest. So we just were together, prayed, and had the kids enjoy spending time with other kids. And so that was the theme for that. Come to me, all you who are weary, heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Ukraine needs rest. We need rest. The war is not just physical, it's spiritual as well. You can imagine families that are separated from the most horrific times in their lives. Children, soldiers, and it's a difficult time. Information war as well. That's been something else that's been challenging. But we know and trust in God. And we have to depend on Him. And I don't know what you would do in a situation like that without God. You know, it's just mind-boggling for me even to think about that. But I want to close in prayer and continue to, don't forget Ukraine. I mean, I think it's pushed off the headlines a little bit. But I think the next few months are crucial for them, not just militarily, I'm talking spiritually, as people are open and people want they want hope. They need forgiveness. They need the love of God. And we're seeing the start of that. The start of something that I saw back in 1992. And I remember returning thinking, I wish I had church planners here now. We could start so many churches now. I said, we have trained church planners. And after COVID lockdowns, which made outreach difficult, they said COVID ended the day the war started. Nobody cares about any of that anymore. Your focus has changed. And we continue to serve there. I am part of one of four people in charge of the Ukraine Crisis Fund. Churches and people have given over $1 million to that fund over the last few months. And that's one of my main ministries, is to contact inside the country. Some of it's going outside to the border countries that are doing good ministry in Ukrainians. My focus, I'm the only of the four, that my focus is entirely in Ukraine. So I'm talking to these people, I'm getting them funds, I'm getting them what they need when they need it. So that's also a taxing job. And grateful for the opportunity to have that. But that's something else you can pray for, wisdom for us and endurance. And so we close in prayer. And I've seen the word stand with Ukraine, and they always stand when they pray. So I think it's kind of dual role. So if we can stand, I'll close our time in prayer. Lord, we see your hand. We see you working throughout our world. In and around Ukraine is pain, is struggles, but there's also light in the darkness. We pray for peace. We pray for the end to this fighting. We pray for the time of restoration and healing and forgiveness to begin. And we pray that you will be with the church in Russia, for the gospel witness to shine in the darkness there, for endurance for these pastors and these churches that are doing what only you can give them to do, and that's the strength to serve you. We thank you for this church. We thank you for their support of my family and what you're doing in our world.